Monaco investigators today essentially named the mastermind behind the attempted assassination of Ukrainian oligarch Yermolaev. The incident in Monaco made headlines in all Western media because it involves a Ukrainian oligarch. Investigators in Monaco believe that the security service of Ukraine may be involved in the attempted bombing of the family of sanctioned Ukrainian oligarch Vadim Yermolaev. Although earlier the media linked this incident to the activities of call centers in Dnipro, because of which several months ago Vadim Yermolaev's son, Artur, was detained in Cyprus at the request of Interpol. He could have turned in his accomplices in Europe. Yermolaev Jr. received a suspended sentence precisely for cooperating with the investigation. On the other hand, European media are raising the issue that the Russian FSB, the Federal Security Service, could actually be behind the attempt on Yermolaev's life. The fact is, it is Yermolaev's son who is considered the owner of a network of fraudulent call centers operating for Russia. 5 months earlier, another businessman who was linked to the same business was killed in Bali. And back in October last year, FSB Director Alexander Bortnikov stated that there are more than 120 call centers in Ukraine, which are allegedly overseen by the SBU and the armed forces of Ukraine. And just recently, Russian drones even attacked call centers in Dnipro, and Bortnikov promised to take revenge. So there is definitely something to look into here. Let's review everything step by step, starting with a reminder of the overall situation. On June 29, around 9 p.m. local time, there was an explosion near one of the houses in Monaco. A surveillance camera captured the moment when a backpack with an explosive device was placed at the base of the building. The suspect, who can be seen in the video, crossed the Monaco border on foot and disappeared somewhere in France. A man and a woman, as well as a 13-year-old teenager who is likely a relative of the couple, were injured in the explosion. On Tuesday morning, Monaco's Attorney General Stéphane Thibault reported that Yermolaev and his partner were injured in the explosion, with his partner sustaining very serious injuries. The police were not aware of any threats against Yermolaev. Yermolaev, I should note, made his fortune in the southeastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro during the turbulent post-Soviet years. He was mainly involved in real estate and at one point was among the richest Ukrainians. And you know, I liked how Dnipro was described today on CNN. Quote, "Before the war, Dnipro had a reputation as a showy capital of wealth and luxury, where the line between local authorities and criminal elements was not always clear. The city is also known for its thriving Jewish community, of which Yermolaev was a prominent and active member. Yermolaev left his homeland and renounced his Ukrainian citizenship in 2019. The 58-year-old oligarch and politician is currently a citizen of Cyprus, although he previously lived in Monaco. The motive for the assassination attempt remains unclear. Yermolaev apparently has no obvious connections to the war in Ukraine, but as they say, those are only the obvious ones." In December 2023, Kyiv imposed sanctions against him for conducting business in Crimea, which is occupied by Russia. However, Yermolaev's son Artur Yermolaev is a well-known figure on the Ukrainian criminal scene. He was arrested in Cyprus this spring on charges of being the organizer of a large-scale fraudulent scheme, the very scam call centers in question. Later, he was extradited to Estonia, where in April he was found guilty of large-scale fraud. And so, according to court documents, Artur Yermolaev pleaded guilty to creating and running a fraudulent phone scheme. That is, call centers, which under the guise of fake investment opportunities, stole about 100 million euros from victims in various European countries between 2019 and 2022. In Estonia alone, Yermolaev and his accomplices robbed people of almost 5.5 million euros. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but cut a deal with investigators, according to which he was deported from Estonia after serving only 4 months of his sentence. He paid a fine of 8.5 million euros and covered the expenses related to his extradition to Estonia. And so, according to Estonian media, after that he was deported to Israel, where he is most likely residing now. But before leaving, he allegedly managed to turn in his European politicians to investigators. And there is a theory that an international criminal syndicate is behind the attempt on Yermolaev's life. In other words, his accomplices, his associates, whom he might have really turned into investigators, which is why he was released. And today, there is information that investigators in Monaco believe that the security service of Ukraine may be involved in the bombing of the family of the sanctioned Ukrainian oligarch Vadim Yermolaev. Although earlier, the media linked the incident to the activities of call centers in Dnipro, because of which several months ago in Cyprus, the already mentioned son of Yermolaev, Artur, was detained at the request of Interpol. This was reported today by Le Figaro. The Kyiv authorities have already commented on this incident, and they did so the day before yesterday. They assured that Ukrainian diplomats are at the scene of the attempted attack on the family of Ukrainian origin, and added that the agency is identifying the victims and verifying information about their Ukrainian citizenship. And yesterday, during a briefing, Monaco's Attorney General Stéphane Thibault said that law enforcement officers are still pursuing the unidentified bomber. They hope that he will be apprehended soon. Meanwhile, the media reported that the fugitive may have already headed to Italy, but the prosecutor's office is keeping quiet about this and is not saying whether he had an accomplice or organizer. Most likely they've already lost him. And next I'll quote Le Figaro, which many Russian propagandists picked up on today. Quote, "The main version being considered by investigators is that this was an operation organized by the security service of Ukraine. This attack was most likely a warning for Yermolaev, and that's it. There is no further evidence to support that the SBU was behind the assassination attempt." On the other hand, the agency's publication writes that another intelligence service may be behind the attempt on Yermolaev's life. This is the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation, the FSB. The fact is that the Dnipro call centers were actively scamming money from Russians, especially from the savage Russian occupiers. And the head of the FSB, Bortnikov, even threatened to take revenge for this. Vadim Yermolaev, who was injured in the explosion in Monaco on Monday, had several stories that connected him to Russia. Well, first of all, in Ukraine he was accused of continuing his business in Crimea after the annexation and of paying hundreds of millions of rubles into the Russian budget. Secondly, his son is considered the owner of a network of fraudulent call centers operating for Russia. 5 months earlier, another businessman who was also linked to the same call center business in Dnipro was killed in Bali. And now all Russian propaganda is focusing on Yermolaev's connection with the call centers. Yermolaev owns a wine business in Crimea, and after the annexation of the peninsula by Russia, his company Alev Vinal was simply split into Ukrainian and Russian parts. The company Alev Vinal Crimea, the new division, and the Burlyuk winery associated with Yermolaev repeatedly received loans in Russia after the annexation, which proves that Yermolaev continued to operate there. In addition, Yermolaev's companies fulfilled at least 4 contracts with Russian state agencies for almost 140 million rubles. As a result, only in December 2023, that is almost 10 years later, Volodymyr Zelensky imposed sanctions against Yermolaev specifically for his activities in Crimea. And at that time, investigators calculated that during the occupation of Crimea, Yermolaev paid almost 500 million rubles in taxes to the Russian treasury. In addition, since the annexation, Yermolaev visited Russia at least 8 times up until December 2018. This is confirmed by leaked data. Yermolaev himself denied owning or managing any business in Crimea and claimed that his Crimean assets were lost forever after the annexation. According to Yermolaev, Russian military stole equipment worth 23 million euros from his company and destroyed his Gulfstream J-150 aircraft with a missile strike. But the Yermolaev family also had another business. These were illegal call centers. The explosion may be connected to the operation of call centers in Dnipro. Ukrainska Pravda reported this, citing sources. A network of more than 50 illegal call centers is run by the millionaire's son, the same Artur Yermolaev. And as I already mentioned, in April, a court in Estonia gave him a suspended sentence for organizing phone fraud with a turnover of 100 million euros. Interestingly, shortly before the assassination attempt, Russian pro-government media began calling Yermolaev Sr. himself the owner of the fraudulent call centers. The propagandists claimed that the fraudulent call centers from Dnipro, which deceive Russians, became a serious problem during the war because they swindled millions from the wild Russians. In October of last year, FSB Director Alexander Bortnikov stated that there are more than 120 such call centers operating in Ukraine, which are allegedly overseen by the security service and the armed forces of Ukraine. And last week, the Z-blog Rybar, which is close to the Russian Ministry of Defense, reported that in September, several Russian drones even attacked one of these call centers in Dnipro. The point is that the call centers in Dnipro were scamming money even from Russian occupiers who were receiving payments for fighting against Ukraine. Basically, in Dnipro, they were really scamming quite a lot of money out of the pockets of these underdeveloped, savage Russians. And now, online, people are connecting the assassination attempt on Yermolaev in Monaco with another very similar incident. Let me remind you, in February, news broke about the brutal murder of Ukrainian Ihor Komarov in Bali, who was also linked to call centers. And some media outlets reported that people from Chechnya might be behind Komarov's abduction. But I should note that the story with Komarov in Bali is shrouded in very vague details which, in the end, well, don't really add up to a single coherent picture. That's why I'll add once again in conclusion. Only the investigation will be able to identify the real masterminds and perpetrators of the attempt on Yermolev's life.